Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive really deep into how the human brain distorts reality and, more importantly, how we can literally manually override these cognitive glitches. So, if you've ever felt trapped by your own negative thinking, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Okay, we're going to kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Are we actually experiencing reality, or are we just living inside our mind's interpretation of it? Most of us go through our entire lives just assuming that what we see and feel is the absolute, unquestionable truth. But as we'll see today, from the perspective of cognitive therapy, there's a massive, massive gap between what actually happens out there and the story our brain spins about it in here.
Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, interpretation of reality. 2, survival instead of truth. 3 common cognitive distortions. 4, hidden layers of the mind. And finally, number 5, the power of writing thoughts.
Let's start right in with Section 1, Interpretation of Reality. Honestly, this is the bedrock of everything we're about to discuss.
The fundamental rule of cognitive behavioral therapy really boils down to this. Our cognition is simply a multi-layered interpretation of what's happening around us. We never actually interact with reality directly. Crazy, right? Instead, we're interacting with a mental representation of it. And if that representation is flawed or distorted, well, our entire experience of life becomes pretty painful, even if the external reality is completely fine.
To really ground this psychology in the real world, let's look at a case study from our source material. Meet Sam. Sam's a 55-year-old guy who recently went through a really tough divorce, lost his job, and just found himself completely isolated. He was spending all day in his apartment, just aimlessly scrolling through social media, watching TV. He was struggling with severe clinical depression. Basically, his mind was telling him an incredibly dark story about his reality.
But here is the amazing part. Through 18 therapy sessions spread out over 8 months, Sam's reality totally changed. Not by magic, obviously, but through structured intervention. He set very specific goals to regain control of his life using a cognitive action plan. He committed to managing his home better, searching for work, reconnecting with his family and friends, and getting his fitness back on track. The main takeaway here is that Sam had to start actively participating in rewiring his own mind. Moving right along to Section 2, Survival instead of Truth. Now, you might be wondering, why do our brains create these debilitating negative interpretations in the first place? Like, why did Sam's brain default to such a dark, isolated place?
Picture our ancient ancestors out in the jungle. They hear a sudden rustling in the bushes. They immediately have two choices, right? Assume it's a deadly predator and run away, or assume it's just the wind and hang out. The ones who assumed it was just the wind, well, occasionally they were right, but sometimes they got eaten. The ones who assumed it was a predator survived, even if they were wrong 99 times out of 100. Over time, our brains literally evolved to prioritize survival and threat detection way above discovering the objective truth.
So this is absolutely crucial to understand. Seeing the negative or jumping to the absolute worst possible conclusion, that is not a sign of being crazy or broken. It is literally just an evolutionary glitch. It's an outdated survival mechanism handed down from our ancestors who are just trying to keep us safe. Your brain isn't out to make you miserable. It's genuinely trying to keep you alive. It's just, well, it's running on a really outdated operating system for the modern world.
Let's look at Section 3, 3 common cognitive distortions. We're going to examine the most common ways this survival instinct completely misfires in our daily lives.
Our source breaks down 3 main cognitive distortions. First up is mind reading. This is where we just assume someone is thinking negatively about us with zero actual evidence. And it's usually driven by this deep core belief of, I am not enough. Second is fortune telling. That's when we predict absolute total failure before we even try something new, mostly driven by a massive fear of the unknown. And third is catastrophizing. This is taking a tiny, minor setback and assuming the absolute worst-case scenario is going to unfold. Because deep down, the core belief is, I simply cannot cope.
Let's look at a super relatable, everyday example. You send a text to a friend, and they leave you unread. Boom! Mind reading, that ancient evolutionary glitch scanning for threats, kicks in and makes us instantly assume, oh, they're mad at me, they hate me. Our brain writes this whole dramatic, terrible story. But the boring, more likely reality, they're probably just busy at work. But our brain completely skips over logic just to protect us from what it perceives as social rejection.
All right, Section 4, Hidden Layers of the Mind. To actually fix these mental glitches, we can't just slap a Band-Aid on them. We have to peel back the actual architecture of our thoughts.
Our source material uses this fantastic analogy of a walnut to explain this. The human mind basically has layers. The outermost layer, like that green, fleshy peel of a fresh walnut, represents our automatic thoughts, those quick, knee-jerk negative reactions, like, they hate me. Just below that is the hard, woody shell, our intermediate beliefs. And then, deep, deep inside, is the nut itself, our core beliefs. Now, those core beliefs, they take an entire lifetime to form, and they silently drive everything else.
If we only try to fix those surface-level automatic thoughts, but we completely ignore restructuring those deep, absolute core beliefs, the anxiety is absolutely going to return. It's guaranteed. The real work is changing an absolute thought like, I failed completely, into a restructured relative thought like, okay, I wasn't successful this time, but I am not a failure. It completely shifts your perspective from a permanent identity to just a temporary experience.
This brings us to Section 5, the power of writing thoughts. So, how do we actually reach down to that deep core and restructure those beliefs in our everyday busy lives? Let's get practical.
The most effective tool recommended in our clinical source is actually surprisingly simple. You keep 2 notebooks. First, you have a small pocket notebook that you carry everywhere. Its only job is to catch those quick, automatic negative thoughts, literally the moment they happen during your day. Then, you have a second, larger black notebook that stays at home. That one is for deep, Jungian self-reflection. You sit down, open it up, and really analyze why those thoughts appeared and what core beliefs are hiding underneath. Putting pen to paper physically separates the thought from your mind. It's incredibly powerful.
So, whenever a negative thought pops up, you pull out your pocket notebook and you hit it with these Socratic sifting questions. You become a detective of your own mind. Ask yourself, what is the actual evidence for this thought? What confirms it? What actually denies it? And is there a simpler alternative explanation? The source even mentions using the Occam's razor principle here. Basically, you're challenging the distortion right there on paper.
Now get this. Our source points out a pretty wild statistic. 99.99% of people mistakenly believe that their thoughts and feelings are their actual identity. They walk around thinking, I am my anxiety, or I am a failure. But that's simply not true. Your thoughts and your identity are entirely separate. You are the observer of your thoughts. You are not the thoughts themselves.
And just to be super clear here, the goal of the techniques in this explainer is absolutely not some forced, toxic positivity. We aren't trying to walk around pretending everything is perfectly fine when it isn't. The real goal is realistic, accurate thinking. It's about getting some distance, looking at the data of your life objectively, and finally realizing that you are not those intrusive evolutionary glitch thoughts. You have the power to rewrite the interpretation.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought, and the choice is entirely yours. Are you going to let your brain's outdated evolutionary glitches just keep writing a story of anxiety and fear for you, or are you going to take out a notebook, catch those thoughts, and start writing your own realistic, empowered reality today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you start writing.